What's going on, everyone? Today is the first vlog update for this season of the monthly Mayhem series, and this is the Ultra4usion series. Actually forgot to figure out the name before I filmed my first video, so Matt got to, discuss it in his, but I never actually knew the name of what we were calling this when I filmed mine. Anyway, I'm here with the Fusion kit, all built up the exact same as you saw it in the last video. But today what I'm going to do is I'm going to start laying out how I'm going to do my tube work first. That's most of what I'm going to try and focus on, is kind of the fabrication and look of this thing. So I am going to take this rig and I'm going to pull some of the most critical and hard points that I can find or that I'm thinking about using on it. And I'm going to put some of that in CAD, and I'm going to just rough out the base chassis setup here. And then from there, I'm going to start drawing my tube work. I'm going to try and do it pretty quick and dirty, though. I'm not going to go fully into how I would normally draw up a tube chassis to build. But I don't want to totally wing it, because there's some lines that I'm really going to try and shoot for. So I'm going to run through a little bit of that tonight. I'll kind of show you how I'm going to lay it in there so that I can scale it off of it and then start drawing some of the artwork. Just give you like a little bit of a look into how I plan out my chassis stuff. So today's actually Tuesday. The series airs, the first episode, tomorrow morning. So I don't know any of the responses or any of that stuff yet. Just really starting to get kicked off. I actually have to go out of town, unfortunately, from Thursday to Tuesday, so I'm losing this big chunk of time out of this series where I really was planning on, wanting to get some work done. So I'm trying to pack some of it in before, and then when I get back, I'm gonna have to try and make up as much time as I can. So that's what we're gonna get into tonight. We're gonna try that. I'm gonna start drawing, show you guys how I attack this. So the Fusion's here on my super messy desk. Sorry about that. I'm short on time, otherwise I'd clean it first. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to negate the body mounts, both front and rear. I'm going to probably keep most of this front bumper setup. Not all of it. I'm probably going to, narrow it down actually to make it look a little bit more Ultra 4. But I might actually use some of those mounting points, or I might kind of just mount up a tube up in front of it, try and make it look like it belongs but still function as it's initially or originally intended to work. So we'll kind of see that. I'm going to keep the front shock towers mounted like they are, and I'll just kind of work the tube work around it, try and make it all look functional, but try and keep this thing friendly to both maintenance and replacement parts, anything like that, so that I can keep the cage mainly for looks. It'll have some structural ability and structural integrity, all that to it, but I'm not really trying to have it be a replacement for a lot of the parts you see in here. Really, it's just to try and make everything easier on me. That's the biggest point of all of it. But we're going to do most of this in SolidWorks, so I'm going to crank open a new SolidWorks document. I'm going to pull some initial hard points, throw those in CAD, and that's where we'll kind of pick back up after I've got some of this initial base work done. All right, so I took as many base measurements, just super rough. I'm talking tape measure and metric ruler rough, just super base, because fabrication is always going to come in, there's always going to be some tweaking here and there. So this is what we've got now. Now this may look a little funny, but up in the front, I basically got the 3 wheel positions, full left, full right, and center, and then the other thing is that I've got everything here basically drawn at full bump. So this is as high as the tire and wheels are going to get up to the chassis. What that's going to allow me to do is draw all my chassis tubes and make sure that no matter where the truck is in the suspension cycle, I'm not going to have major rubbing, because I'll draw things pretty close to that, because otherwise when it's fully extended, you end up with like these massive, wheel cutouts and things like that. But I'm gonna try and, go around the tires as much as possible rather than trying to accommodate for them. So I'll kind of try and dodge in. It'll get pretty narrow in the front, the rear, same, it'll come between those shock towers there. So that's going to allow me to try and get the base of this done. Now from here, I'm going to grab a picture from online, and I'm going to put it into the drawing to start giving me my profile. And from there, I'm gonna set a bunch of points on that profile so that I can start extruding lines out from it, so then I can start playing around with points. I'll show you that as soon as we get to that step. All right, so we've got the photo downloaded and put onto the sketch. I'll show you that. This photo is actually a perfect photo because it's actually taken from the CAD rendering from Triton Engineering, and Jordan Pellegrino had posted that onto his Facebook and Instagram. So it's a perfect, profile shot. There's no perspective, which is ideal. Normally, a normal photo camera, it's got perspective, so things are skewed forward and back. And again, I'm not trying to make a replica of this. This is just the one that I like. It is independent all the way around. But we'll take a look at this here and I'll show you what we're dealing with. So I've brought the photo in here and you can see it's midway in through there. And I'm gonna fix this photo, and then we're going to be able to pull off, basically I'm gonna create nodes at joints on the cage, and we're gonna pull out from there, and I'll adjust widths, and then we'll start to look at actual bar positions and things like that. But again, so this is basically scaled off of the wheelbase more than anything. Obviously 2.2 size tires do not scale appropriately to the size of actual tires. 2.2s is usually just a little bit more blown out. But anyway, so we're scaling it to the wheelbase more than anything. It actually works out pretty well though, as far as shock positions, front and rear. Overall tube heights, back here is going to look pretty good. In the front, with it pinching in, I think it'll look really, really good as well. The one thing that I am going to take into account before we really get too far is I'm going to size this driver compartment for a bomber interior. I want to be able to just drop a bomber pan in there and cover up everything, make everything super easy on me, so I don't have to do any, custom fabrication of an interior. That's just going to be one step. If I do it now, I'll save all of the hassle of having to try and figure things out later on. Now you will also notice that in this model, I do still have these side guards in here on the chassis. For now, I'm going to try and design with those in mind, trying to keep those in place. This actual one's got large boat sides coming up. Obviously this is a 2D picture and a 3D drawing, so it doesn't make sense, but the actual door bar is quite high compared to the bottom of the boat sides. The door bar is probably in here, then we obviously have the bottom of the chassis here. But this is where we're at. So now I'm going to start pulling a bunch of points. I'm going to drop what my bomber interior mounting points are so that I can try and work around that. And that is the next step. So we had that photo in place. Now I've gone along and placed a lot of my profile lines, creating those nodes where I want to then, bring the points out and give depth and start, really starting to tweak the width as things go forward and backwards throughout the chassis. We'll show you the two steps because I've actually kind of already done both of those two things. But first I will show you the actual profile line. So this fine blue line, in the front here I've actually stretched it out a little bit just because I want to try and get up. This is that existing front bumper distance. I want to try and keep that. I'm going to bring the cage up towards the front, stop it a little bit short so this can still have some give. I'm going to narrow up that front plastic bumper but leave it in place. So from there I've just created some of those points. I've measured this cabin for the bomber interior. It's actually going to work perfectly exactly the scale and shape it is, so pretty stoked on that. But then you can see I created these points here. Here's this node there, point up there, point back here. These I've gone with a straight line between rather than this arc. I'm not going to try and replicate the arcs. While it makes this chassis look fantastic, I just don't have the time to try and do that. So I've done that. I put the B pillar in. I guess if you want to call this a C pillar, then or this would be your B pillar really normally, not up here, but it doesn't really matter. And then I've followed that along throughout the back. So after I finished that setup, then I came in and I created a second sketch using those points. So I created these horizontal lines that came out from that node point. I just pulled them out, just distances that were just kind of off the top of my head. Nothing, I didn't actually look at it or measure. I just pulled random distances, and then I kind of just went through and played connect the dots. So pulling lines from here up, back, creating the windshield up bar, that B pillar or second A pillar, however you want to call it, and just went along the chassis. You know, you just keep rotating around, looking at things, and then from there, I start throwing dimensions on. Now, I'm working with half the chassis at a time. I'm basically ignoring that the second half works. I'm just gonna draw one side, then I can basically just mirror it, and it's half the work. So I've started then playing with some distances, and I'm playing with these based on looking at things like shock positions, making sure that I don't plant. This is my shock cylinder here. We'll go out of this, it'll allow me to look a little closer. So this is the cylinder that I drew in place of where the actual shock is. Of course, there's, you know, a little bit more clearance around the top cap and things like that, but we're just keeping it simple. But I was going to draw a bar that went from like this point here down to the chassis point. Well, that would cut through the shock. So just take that bar out now, make sure I don't plan on it, then I save myself the trouble. But you can see these other bars that we've done, they kind of just go up and over, they clear the shock tower. Should allow us to create the look of this while maintaining all of those hard points that we already know are there. I created the width based on making sure that it would work with a bomber, even if I want to trim it down, and making sure that it's slightly wider than the chassis pan itself, because I do want to try and kind of cover these side panels in some fashion. Haven't 100% decided how that's going to happen yet, but we'll get there. So that has kind of created the basic shape of what we've got going on. So there's hiding that other sketch. And with just sketch lines and big ass tires, it is kind of hard to really see what's coming here. But once I extrude tubes and add radiuses, radii along these bend points and what single tubes will be, it will make things a lot more simple. So there's still a lot of work here to go. This is as far as I'm really going to kind of probably take this side of it as far as the CAD goes. The CAD work is not something that most people are going to do. It's not that important. I mean, I do it this way because I don't have a good visual to freehand things as well. I don't freehand often, and I don't feel that it's my strong point. I feel that I can bend virtual tubes in CAD and tweak them a lot easier, and I feel a lot more proficiently than I can in the real world. So if I try and play to my strengths in CAD, design up what I feel it should look like, and then I can try my best to replicate what I've designed. This helps me build more accurately, you know, because I can make paper templates and then make things go along those templates much more easily than if I were to try it the old-fashioned way and bend one and then try and match one. If you wanted to try and do it this way as well, Autodesk Fusion 360 is free. You can download it, you can play around with CAD, you can do everything I showed here the exact same way. Tools and toolbars are going to be in little different places, but you can do everything I'm doing with free software available for download right now. So there's nothing stopping you from learning, and if you want to get into 3D printing or something like that, I highly suggest that you go start learning CAD. It makes everything so much more powerful. It's a little after 8:30 now. I'm probably going to play around with this a little bit more, maybe knock out a few of the real tubes that I'm going to do. Once I get the look of this top section done, that's really my most important part. From there, we're just going to make it fit on there and make it look right. So I'll try and get as much done as I can tonight and show you guys an end result before we move on to the next video. All right, so here's where we're going to end for the night. This is my basic tube structure design that we're gonna go with. Kind of a narrowed in pinch section in the rear, long hood with a nice little bend in it. Another nice thing about doing a 3D design like this is I'll be able to design and 3D print a hood. I did this one here recently. This was a very simple flat hood, but this was for a Red Dragon replica for a local guy, Gene Boyd, with a UC Fab Red Dragon replica. So that one was super simple, but I've also done some much more complex ones, like the laser nut car that I did a replica hood for a UC Fab design. So being able to do this, I'll be able to design up something in 3D, kind of whip that out, and then throw it on, and then throw something with a lot of shape and detail on the 3D printer, and we'll just be able to, you know, have cool hoods without having to do any sort of, you know, real crazy fab work. Like I said, you know, this is the main point. From here, this gives me the structure, and then I can figure out how to tie it in, as well as add all the bracing, like, you know, a windshield brace, and then if I need to do any more bracing in the hood area, specifically, of course, I need to do the mounts to the chassis. I'm going to do mount to the bulkheads, both front and rear. I'll do a mount to this section back here where that rear bumper would mount on. I will eliminate completely the rear bumper, maybe make a skid plate to kind of fill that in myself. And then of course the center chassis braces is a whole other thing. Hopefully I can just do some tie-in points front and rear at the shock towers and bulkhead areas and not have to do anything in the center, and I can just kind of work on hanging panels to make that all look appropriate. So one more thing that I do is that while I'm creating this, I actually create these tubes in sections as far as how I actually plan to fabricate, such as this tube here is one tube. You can see that the joints down here, they overlap. You can see that it's actually a tube that goes into there, and that'll all have to get notched by hand and fit in. But this is actually a junction of 4 tubes at this location. So I'll build, you know, a lower section, then I'll tie in the top. But I don't actually cope these. I want them the full length, and then I'll trim them by hand in the real world rather than in CAD. But like I said, this is one tube all the way back to this section back here, where again it'll cope into a big bunch of tubes. But I actually break those up as I'm doing it. This lower section here will be one tube. It'll come along and back to here, you know, and these are just filler pieces. Very simple, very straightforward, you know, and so forth. So thinking about that now is the key. That way I can, when I make the templates for tubes, I've already got it envisioned and how I'm going to break that up, rather than having to try and think of, oh, you know, I need a radius here on between these 2 tubes because I need to be able to bend it or not. There's lots of those little things. You got to think of it before you actually build it. You know, building in CAD is all great and fine and all, but if you don't actually think about how you have to make it, it doesn't save you anything. It doesn't save you any time. So lots of little details, but it's worth it. You know, I've been working on this this took me 3 hours roughly, you know, maybe a little less, but honestly, that 3 hours worth of work, while I could have maybe built a top like that in, you know, 4 or 5 hours, and it probably wouldn't have turned out exactly how I wanted, you know. So I can spend 3 hours now. It'll cut a little bit of time off of the actual fabrication time, but the look will be so much better than what I could have done freehand, I feel, anyway. So some other people are going to be just wizards at freehanding. That's not me though. So, but being that it's 9 o'clock at night now, that's a wrap. I'm going to head home and start editing this video. The first video for Monthly Mayhem goes live in, you know, 10 or 12 hours or something like that. Hopefully it's well received, and then hopefully this one is well received shortly after. Make sure and watch next Wednesday for the next episode of Monthly Mayhem. I appreciate you guys watching all of these. This one, I hope, is fun, and I'm really looking to get into the fabrication side of this challenge. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're not already. Hit the notification bell so you see all the videos of Monthly Mayhem as soon as they pop up. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one.